You were just looking at that live vantage point there at the White House. That's where we want to take our next story. So, as you know, you were watching President Trump. He had many events today there in the White House, especially in the Oval Office. Remember, he was meeting with the leader of the Republic of Korea. We're getting into that a little bit later on. We have a lot of international headlines to get to. But this has kind of sparked conversation, something President Trump said, specifically when it comes to burning the American flag and what type of criminal penalties he thinks that should bring with it here. So the president today signing an executive order requiring the Justice Department to investigate and prosecute people for burning the American flag. It's an activity that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled is legitimate political expression protected by the U.S. Constitution, protected by the First Amendment here. So if you didn't catch this earlier today, this was the moment President Trump brought this up in the Oval Office. Let's watch this.
All over the country, they're burning flags. All over the world, they burn the American flag. And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech. But there's another reason, which is perhaps much more important. It's called death. Because what happens when you burn a flag is the area goes crazy. But when you burn the American flag, it incites riots at levels that we've never seen before. People go crazy. What the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing.
Okay, so President Trump there kind of elucidating what he thinks the penalty should be via this executive order. Though in the meantime, we do want to bring into the conversation right now someone who knows a lot about this, Chief Counsel with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, otherwise known as FIRE, Bob Corn-Revere. He joins me. Bob, good to see you here. I know you've been following this all day, especially because this kind of rears its head every so often in the national discourse here. Let's just start first up, square off with this. How does a president make this illegal unilaterally via an executive order? Can he do that?
Well, he can't do it legally. It's a settled question constitutionally. The Supreme Court has not once, but twice made it clear that not only does the First Amendment protect this burning a flag as a expression of political protest, but when Congress tried to pass a law, that too was found to be unconstitutional. And so you can't paper over that with an executive order.
So this was some while back proposed via constitutional amendment. Obviously, we know that process is much longer than a president signing an executive order. Also, what's Congress's role here? Has the president, do you think, considered all of these options today or no?
It doesn't appear that he has thought it through, because a lot of what he was talking about, I really don't know where it comes from, where he talks about having a 1-year penalty and no exceptions. The executive order itself says that they're going to rely on local laws. And if, say, for example, disturbing the peace is violated when someone is burning a flag, then he'll recommend that the Justice Department either prosecute or recommend local prosecution. So that 1-year statement and his assessment of penalties comes out of nowhere.
So I have to ask this. Does any legal scholar, any contemporary of yours think the president has the authority to do this, or are they all on the same page that he does not?
I think by now they are. There was some debate about this back when when the Supreme Court first held that flag burning was unconstitutional, and some suggesting that Congress could then backstop it and pass a law that would be a narrower, content neutral. That was attempted and failed. And then for years after that, there was an attempt to get into the Constitution that would have amended the First Amendment for the first time in our history. That fortunately failed as well.
We're taking a live look there at the White House. How immediate do you think this will be litigated against? Who are the groups that are going to sue? Is FIRE going to sue against this?
Well, it's way too early to tell that, but I think that the days are not going to be long before we see a test of this. I just saw footage earlier this evening of a veteran who was arrested today in Lafayette Park for burning a flag in protest because of this executive order. And so I think it's not going to be too long before we see a test case.
Can you kind of elucidate for us as well how this has somewhat already been adjudicated within the courts? The right to freedom of expression, the right to burn an American flag.
Well, it's been litigated for decades in one way or another. If you go back to the 1940s, the question was whether or not the government could compel school children to salute the flag and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And the Supreme Court, in a landmark decision, said, no, you can't force people to respect the flag. And then in the 1970s, there were other cases on whether or not you could prevent someone from using the flag as a form of protest. And the Supreme Court held that no, the First Amendment protects that kind of symbolic expression. And so finally, in the 1980s, we had Texas versus Johnson, which was the 1989 decision in which the Supreme Court held that flag burning is a form of protest that the First Amendment protects. And while the president, in his announcement today, said that it was a sad court, it was only 5-4, it should be remembered that one of the most conservative justices in our history, Antonin Scalia, was in the majority in that case. And the court described this as a bedrock principle of American jurisprudence, that the First Amendment protects against government restrictions, even and especially for speech that we find offensive and disagreeable. And so the constitutional law in this area is really quite clear and rock solid.
I mean, have we ever seen an indication or a scenario in which, from the Oval Office, sitting behind the Resolute desk, a president says, I'm making a new law that if you burn an American flag, you will get a year in jail? I mean, that's not how our system works.
Well,
Co-equal branches of government. I thought Congress wrote the laws, Bob.
It's not how any of this works. The president does not write the laws. He doesn't assess the penalties. Kings do that, but not in our country. And that, by the way, is one of the points that Justice Scalia made. He was interviewed a few years after Texas versus Johnson was decided and asked about his decision supporting the First Amendment protection for this kind of expression. And he said, if I were a king, I would gladly prohibit flag burning. But we don't have kings in this country. We have a constitution.
So, Bob, lastly, where do you think this is all going?
Too early to tell.
Okay.
As with many of these things, once controversies get started like this, ultimately they end up in the courts, they get resolved in the courts. Sometimes it can happen quickly, sometimes it takes years. We have First Amendment battles going on a variety of levels right now because of how active this administration has been, despite issuing one of the first executive orders when President Trump came back to office, saying that free speech is back, free speech is going to be protected, and no federal official is going to be permitted to restrict protected speech. And yet here we have yet another example of where precisely that is what is happening.
So, Bob, also, this just came to me. I mean, what would you say to someone who is sympathetic to what President Trump is trying to achieve? Many Americans find it extremely objectionable when they see an American flag burning, some of whom, I would imagine, they want to see a penalty for it. What would you tell them? They're not free speech absolutists like you, maybe, or maybe not. I mean, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't like the word absolutist because I don't think it really means that much, but I would understand why those people are upset. The flag is the symbol of this country, and it is a great country. And it is the place on this planet where we respect these principles the most. And I think it was explained probably best by the Supreme Court the second time this issue of flag burning came in front of it. And this is what the court had to say. Punishing desecration of the flag dilutes the very freedom that makes this emblem so revered and worth revering. And that's what this country stands for, the actuality of rights, the actual exercise of rights, and not just the symbols.
All right, Bob Corn-Revere with Fire. Bob, thanks so much for your time and your expertise into this. We'll see where it goes. Have a good night.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, in the meantime here, I do want to just read out the statement put out by Fire on social media. They said this: that President Trump may believe he has the power to revise the First Amendment with the stroke of a pen, but he doesn't. Flag burning as a form of political protest is protected by the First Amendment. That's nothing new. While people can be prosecuted for burning anything in a place, they aren't allowed to set fires. The government can't prosecute protective, expressive activity, even if many Americans, including the president, find it, quote, uniquely offensive and provocative. You don't have to like flag burning. You can condemn it, debate it, or hoist your own flag even higher. The beauty of free speech is that you get to express your opinions even if others don't like what you have to say. Fire there with the final word today. Let's take a quick commercial break. Still so much more to get to on this Monday when we come back.